But perhaps what's most dangerous is that every marketing technique we've looked at so far, cues that trigger predictable emotional responses, the use of data to create a psychological profile of you, and even loss aversion, are now being used by politicians to hack our minds. Sasha Issenberg is the author of The Victory Lab. It's the story of an ongoing political arms race in which every winning presidential campaign has been the one that took the use of corporate-style marketing techniques to an entirely new level. It all began in the late 1990s.
A handful of Republican consultants who later went to work on George W. Bush's reelection went out to some of these consumer data firms, started acquiring all the data they could on voters and then matching it to their voter registration record. And basically overnight, they went from having a few dozen pieces of information, usually really broad political or demographic categories, to this really granular understanding of not just what people bought, but how they lived.
In many countries, the law forbids a political campaign from purchasing your private data, but not in the United States.
Every time you cast a ballot in the United States, there's a record of it. In most countries, that's not publicly available. And then all of the big private sector data warehouses that have developed in the United States, in most countries in the world, that data is off limits to political campaigns. Just a much higher expectation of personal privacy in other countries, and it's reflected in the laws.
The Bush campaign used all that data about Americans' private lives to develop a marketing strategy they called the secret sauce.
All of a sudden, you had the tools where you could find a small cluster of voters, you could pinpoint them at their home addresses, and you could send them this highly tailored message with a lot of detail about an issue that you had a fairly high confidence that they already knew about and cared about.
I believe we need to encourage personal responsibility so people are accountable for their actions.
Corporate-style marketing turned out to be just as useful for winning the presidency as selling a product.
God bless you all. God bless America.
Then, in 2008, the team behind a young senator from Illinois who was running for president gave the secret sauce a little extra spice. First, the campaign collected more data about Americans' private lives than any campaign in history. Then, the campaign used that data to create voter scores that reliably predicted which cues would be most effective in persuading every one of more than 100 million Americans to vote for Obama. And so, if Obama volunteers knocked on your door, they had cues ready to deliver based on more than 1,000 things they already knew about you.
These scores sort of operate in much the same way that credit rating scores do. They allow an institution, and whether it's a bank or a credit card company or a political party or a campaign field office, to sort through a large number of people in an almost automated way. And then they're saying, how much do you look like one of the people that we've identified as likely to care about veterans issues, or likely to vote in the primary, or likely to vote Republican this year?
So each person just being fit into a bucket into which all these other people have already shown themselves to belong.
Yeah.
You say that very kind of like, oh yeah, that's sort of normal. To me, that makes me freak out a little bit. I mean, the idea that I'm being tracked on that kind of specific level by political operatives, it doesn't seem fair somehow.
To help figure out whether unity, hope, and change would be effective messages, the Obama campaign relied on a team of behavioral experts. Robert Cialdini, whose specialty is social proof and how it can be used to influence people's behavior, was on that team. You've written about the concept of social proof and conformity. Help me understand that. Define that for me.
For me, it's the tendency to decide that something is the right choice because a lot of other people are doing it or have been doing it. The proof is in the social aspect of what's going on, not the merits of the thing.
Right.
It's not factual proof. It's not logical proof. It's social proof. It's not just what a lot of other people are doing. It's what a lot of other people like me are doing that most informs me of what would be appropriate for my choices.
Right. How do people deploy this kind of concept in politics.
You know, there are two strategies that I saw that were employed back in 2008 by the Obama campaign. One was, you know, that sea of faces you see behind speakers who are candidates of one sort or another?
Right. You used to pose people up on a stage against flags.
With curtains or flags behind
right.
them. Now there's people behind them who can't see the speaker. What sense does
They're
that
the worst
make?
seats in the house.
Right. It's not in their interests. It's in the interests of the audience who can see a lot of people who have come to support this candidate. The other thing that was done is to scrupulously arrange that sea of faces so any audience member looking at that scene will see somebody like him or her. If you're blonde, you'll see a blonde. If you're old, you'll see an elderly individual. If you're young, you'll see a kid. Somebody just like me has decided that this is somebody to
To
support.
literally back this guy.
To back this guy, right?
The behavioral science